There's a question many shy away from, yet it lingers quietly in the hearts of those past 60. What truly becomes of an elderly soul when physical life concludes? This isn't about fear nor religious doubt. It's something deeper. An unease born from accumulated experiences, time lived, and the increasingly tangible proximity to the final transition. And it's precisely because it's such a sensitive subject that so many choose silence. But Edgar Cayce, known for his readings on the soul, didn't shy away from this question. He brought forth truths few have dared to hear, much less accept. Amidst visions and messages that transcend the veil of life and death, Cayce left us clues, explanations, and reflections that can bring a rare kind of comfort to those who have seen much, felt much, and now carry more questions than certainties. What Cayce revealed wasn't based on dogma, but on a type of knowledge he claimed to access in an altered state of consciousness, as if the soul itself spoke through him. And among all the messages, there was a recurring one. The soul of an elderly person isn't a dead end, but a turning point. Cayce said that as we age, the soul doesn't weaken or fade away. On the contrary, it begins to break free from the denser bonds of matter, gaining clarity, lightness, and a kind of spiritual maturity that only time provides. If this reflection resonates with you in any way, consider giving this a thumbs up or subscribing to the channel. Sometimes sharing and listening together is what helps us better understand the journey. And in this video, we'll delve deeper into these truths with respect, clarity, and the care that the topic demands. Cayce's vision contradicts many ideas that associate old age with spiritual decline or loss of meaning. He asserted that the final years of life were, in fact, the most sacred. The soul, at this stage, carries an accumulation of learning that makes it more prepared for the next stage of existence. And no pain or suffering is in vain in this process. Every experience, every loss, every inner reunion serves as a necessary step in the refinement of the spirit. The lucidity that many elderly people report before death, according to Cayce, is no coincidence. It's a reflection of this maturity of the soul, which begins to perceive with clarity everything that was previously hazy. He believed that, contrary to what many think, death isn't the most difficult moment in life, it's the clearest. Cayce saw aging as a process in which the body becomes more fragile, but the soul more active. According to him, the spirit of an elderly person begins to operate on more subtle frequencies, becoming more sensitive to intuitions, memories of other lives, and even the presence of deceased loved ones. This sensitivity shouldn't be confused with mental confusion. For Cayce, it was an expansion of consciousness. Many accounts of elderly people who say they've seen deceased relatives or experienced vivid dreams before death were, according to him, signs that the soul was approaching its spiritual origin. This leads us to reflect. Are we paying enough attention to what the elderly have to tell us? Or are we ignoring important messages coming from those who already have one foot in each world? This transition, described as gentle by Cayce, resembles the untying of knots that have formed throughout life. Forgiveness, for example, becomes an almost physical necessity for the elderly soul. Often, it's at this moment that old resentments find the path to relief. Cayce said that the soul, about to embark on a journey, needs to get rid of unnecessary burdens, such as bitterness, fear, and guilt. Therefore, it's common for many elderly people to feel a sudden urge to reconnect, to apologize, or to simply look into the eyes of someone they haven't spoken to in years. This isn't weakness. It's spiritual wisdom in action. It's the natural movement of a soul that understands that death isn't escape, but continuity. And this continuity requires lightness, requires peace, requires surrender. There's also a silent transformation that many ignore, the detachment from the ego. Throughout life, we strive for status, recognition, security, but over time, these concerns lose strength. Cayce said that the elderly person, even without knowing it, begins to turn their gaze inward. And that's where the true awakening lies, when the soul understands that it isn't what it has conquered, but what it has become. This perception brings a kind of serenity that only those who age with awareness can feel. Life ceases to be a race and becomes an understanding. And in this understanding, many discover that what truly matters isn't outside, but within. Cayce reinforced that this discovery is one of the most beautiful gifts of old age, and that it should be welcomed, not ignored. Even among those who don't believe in reincarnation, Cayce's words offer a comforting perspective. He said that the soul of the elderly person carries an accumulated wisdom not only from this life, but from many others. Each mark on the body would be like a record of battles won, of lessons learned, of feelings transformed into understanding. Therefore, according to him, we shouldn't fear aging. We should respect it as the most sacred moment of the journey. Modern culture, however, insists on valuing only youth, as if it were the only phase worthy of fulfillment. Cayce warned, this limited view impoverishes our understanding of existence. We need to listen to the elderly more attentively, because many answers about the soul are there, hidden in their stories and silences. Many elderly people report a sensation that's difficult to explain, that of being with the body present, but with the mind elsewhere. For Cayce, this isn't a symptom of mental weakness, but a sign that the soul is preparing to cross the threshold. He described this phase as a layered transition, where consciousness gradually detaches itself from matter. It's common for the elderly person to feel a certain lightness, even amidst physical pain, a desire to withdraw, to be silent, to simply observe. According to Cayce, this happens because the soul already begins to realign itself with more subtle dimensions, where time and space function differently. These moments of silence shouldn't be forcibly interrupted. They're often spaces of inner reconnection that deserve to be respected. Another important point in Cayce's revelations is the issue of fear. He asserted that the biggest barrier to a good passage wasn't death itself, but the fear of the unknown, and that this fear, when cultivated, blocks the natural flow of the soul. Therefore, he insisted on the importance of sincere conversations about the end of life, especially with the elderly, not as something morbid, but as a form of liberation. When the elderly person understands that death is just a change of state and not an absolute end, they begin to face the days with more serenity. Fear gives way to acceptance, and acceptance to gratitude. Cayce reinforced that this understanding changes everything. It transforms anguish into calm, doubt into peace, and loneliness into reunion with one's own essence. Cayce also warned about the importance of the environment around the elderly person during this phase of transition. He said that the presence of loved ones, the tone of conversations, the calm of the physical space, all influence the state of the soul. The energy around can help or hinder this detachment. Therefore, he recommended that the final moments be surrounded by simplicity, respectful silence, and genuine love. No excessive noise, tension, or forced sadness. The ideal would be to allow the elderly person to feel that they don't need to cling to anything, that they can go in peace without fear, without loose ends. Cayce believed that a peaceful passage begins long before the last breath. It begins at the moment when the elderly person feels that their presence is still valued, that their story has importance, and that their soul is being cared for. In this context, the role of the family becomes essential. Cayce taught that children, grandchildren, and caregivers have a spiritual function in this process, not just helping with medications or tasks, but offering what most comforts the soul: listening, touch, and presence. He said that sometimes a simple hand holding another is more effective than any word. The soul of the elderly person recognizes this gesture as a sign of acceptance. It doesn't need speeches or advice. It needs to feel that it's safe to make the crossing. And it's in this silent surrender that family bonds strengthen definitively, because according to Cayce, no true bond is lost after death. They just change shape. Love continues. The connection remains. Only now, without the limitations of the physical body. In many of his accounts, Cayce described what he called visions of the soul in transit. He reported experiences of people who, moments before dying, seemed to see lights, paths, or loved ones calling for them. These experiences weren't delusions, according to him. They were glimpses of what comes next. And most interestingly, These visions almost always brought an expression of peace to the elderly person's face, as if finally something had made sense, as if the soul recognized that it's going home. This perception doesn't depend on religion, it depends on consciousness. Cayce said that we're all capable of perceiving these signs if we're attentive, and that, by recognizing the beauty of this moment, we stop fearing death and begin to see it as the natural chapter of a long and rich life story. Another recurring point in Cayce's readings was the idea of a life mission. He said that no soul ages by chance. Reaching old age is part of a broader plan, where each experience contributes to spiritual maturity. Even those who think they no longer have a function, who feel the weight of uselessness, are fulfilling an essential role. Sometimes just a conversation, a look, or a shared memory is enough to touch someone's life. Cayce believed that the elderly carry within them not only their own history, but the emotional heritage of several generations. They're like living libraries, where each wrinkle holds an important chapter of existence, and recognizing this value is part of what he called the redemption of the soul, a silent but profoundly transformative recognition. Cayce also spoke about regrets. Many elderly people, as they approach the end of life, feel remorse for past choices. He didn't deny the pain of these memories, but advised seeing them as part of the soul's healing process. Regret, according to him, can be an instrument of transformation when understood with love. It's not about dwelling on the past, but about integrating it with wisdom. The soul doesn't demand perfection, it demands truth. And it's in honesty with one's own mistakes that the light begins to emerge. Cayce asserted that forgiving oneself is one of the last steps before spiritual liberation. When the elderly person allows themselves to make peace with their own path, even with everything that didn't work out, they begin what Cayce called the final stage of preparing the soul for its next journey. There's a very specific moment that Cayce frequently reported: surrender. He said that there comes a point when the elderly person, even without being seriously ill, simply feels that it's time. It's a deep intuition that goes beyond the physical. It's not giving up, nor depression. It's full acceptance. The soul understands that it has fulfilled what it needed to and begins to withdraw subtly, naturally. The signs are discreet: a sudden calm, a lingering gaze, an unexpected thank you. For those around, it may seem strange, but for Cayce, this is the clearest sign that the soul is at peace with its cycle. And when this happens, the body only follows. The goodbye isn't dramatic, it's serene, as if the soul said in silence that everything is all right, that now it's time to move on. In Cayce's words, aging isn't just the closing of a cycle, but also an opportunity to teach what's essential. He believed that the elderly have the unique ability to transmit values that time has confirmed as true: patience, gratitude, humility, resilience. These virtues, so talked about and little practiced, are lived in the flesh by those who have faced losses, changes, and new beginnings. Therefore, he said that each conversation with an elderly person is a chance to learn what youth hasn't yet achieved. The silence of a grandfather, the calm of a grandmother, the distant gaze of someone who has seen much aren't signs of absence, but of depth. Cayce invited us to value these signs, because in them, he said, the soul of the elderly person reveals what it has already understood, and that can help us live with more truth. He also spoke about time. According to Cayce, the perception of time changes as the soul detaches itself. For the elderly, the days may seem slower, but also more full of meaning. A simple sunny morning, a hot cup of coffee, an old memory. All of this takes on a different weight. Not because the person is more sensitive, but because the soul is more present. He called this expanded consciousness, and warned that often it's at this stage that profound spiritual insights arise. Some elderly people begin to talk about things they had never said. Others begin to have symbolic dreams or feel connections they can't explain. For Cayce, this wasn't confusion. It was a sign that the soul was attuned to broader realities that escape the common eye. The spiritual lucidity that Cayce described in this final process is something that many ignore. We think that a weakened mind is synonymous with the end, but he said the opposite. The soul strengthens when the body yields. And in this strengthening, silent truths emerge. An elderly person who holds an old photograph and cries isn't just remembering, they're reconnecting with parts of themselves that now become clear. The soul, at this moment, revisits experiences with another look and understands that even what hurt had its purpose. Cayce warned us not to underestimate these moments. They're precious. They're records of the spirit in its purest state. And if we know how to listen, if we pay attention with an open heart, we can understand more about life, death, and everything that unites us on this invisible path between the beginning and the end. Among Cayce's most touching revelations is the idea that no soul departs alone. He described the presence of guides, deceased relatives, and spiritual beings who approach the elderly person in the final moments. For him, this invisible assistance is part of a greater care, which ensures that the crossing happens smoothly. Even if the physical eyes don't see, the soul recognizes these encounters. Therefore, Cayce said that many elderly people talk to people that others don't see, or smile at the empty space shortly before leaving. It's not hallucination, it's reception. The soul, when detaching from the body, begins to see the world as it really is, connected, continuous, welcoming. And this final vision shouldn't be treated with astonishment, but with respect. It represents the beginning of something new and not the end of what existed. Cayce also addressed the importance of preparing the spirit throughout life for this moment. He didn't see death as something that's faced only in the last days, but as a reality that we should accept from the start. When we cultivate spirituality in small attitudes, when we live with purpose, the end doesn't catch us off guard. The elderly person who dedicated themselves to inner listening, who sought to understand their feelings, who learned to love without demanding return, finds it easier to detach. The soul, according to Cayce, responds to truth. And whoever lived with consistency between what they feel and what they do crosses the portal more lightly. It's not about perfection, but about authenticity. And that's something that's built every day, especially in the final years when time seems more precious than ever. Cayce left an essential message. The value of the soul isn't in age, but in the consciousness it reaches. It's not the number of years that defines the preparation for the transition, but how much the soul has understood about itself. Therefore, he said that each elderly person should be seen as a potential master, someone who, even without knowing it, can teach about what really matters. Sometimes all that this soul needs is to be heard, respected, recognized. Society still fails greatly in this point, treating the elderly as invisible, as if they've already fulfilled their role. Cayce invites us to change this perception, to see old age as a phase of revelations, not of forgetting, and by doing so, we give each soul the dignity to move forward with serenity and honor. Cayce taught that the soul doesn't disappear. It continues, learns, evolves. The elderly person who departs takes with them not only memories, but also seeds of everything they've lived. Every gesture of love, every silent overcoming, every forgiveness granted in silence. All of this transforms into light for future paths. And according to him, these seeds don't remain trapped in the past. They germinate in other spheres of existence. Therefore, Cayce asked that we see the farewell not with despair, but with respect and hope. The soul isn't a body that fades away. It's a presence that transforms. And the more we understand this, the more we're able to live our own days with meaning. After all, if the soul continues, then every moment matters. Every choice, every word, every look has an eternal value. It's for this reason that listening to the elderly isn't just an act of empathy. It's a form of spiritual connection. When we stop to listen to someone who has lived so much, we're touching fragments of human history. Cayce said that the older souls carry within them invisible maps, paths already traveled, errors overcome, wisdoms that time has consolidated. Ignoring these maps is missing the chance to understand ourselves. The future is only built well when it respects what came before, and each elderly person is a key to this understanding. Cayce believed that by taking good care of the souls of the elderly, we're also taking care of what's deepest in us, because everyone, sooner or later, will reach this point of the road. And what we desire for others will be what awaits us too. If you've made it this far, perhaps this message has found an important space within you. If it touched your heart, consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment with your reflections. Often, a simple sharing can light a light on the path of someone who is in silence on the other side of the screen. Cayce believed that nothing is by chance, and perhaps this listening is part of something greater. May this content serve as a reminder that aging is a privilege and that the soul of each elderly person deserves to be seen with reverence. Not for what it was, but for what it still represents. May we know together how to value time, welcome farewells, and honor the journeys. The soul continues, and the way we treat it now will be the mirror of what we'll live later.